Welcome to the Language Alchemy Podcast, where we explore how our language and communication patterns directly impact our lives and relationships, and where you get transformative communication tools to bring forth more authenticity and compassion to all your relationships. Thank you for joining me today. This is your host, Alejandra Siroka, a communication teacher and coach who is devoted to helping multicultural individuals, change makers, and couples engaged in personal growth experience the lives and relationships they long for through the power of transformative communication. The language we are exposed to greatly influences the language we use to communicate in our own relationships. And even though we are adults who have our own communication styles, the type of language prevalent in our current society, the media and social media, does seep into our own language. It's a natural occurrence. The more exposed we are to a particular kind of language, the more we will use that kind of language. For example, in the 80s and 90s, if you wanted to talk about how you wanted to buy several new pieces of clothing, you would have never said something like, "My wardrobe needs an upgrade." Or if you were talking to a friend and wanted to know about a good habit they have developed to make their life easier, you would have not asked your friend, "What's your favorite life hack?" Or you would have not heard couples say to each other in an argument something like, "That was me then. Now you are talking to the 3.0 version of me. Why can't you support this version?" We hear that language of computers so often that we have normalized it and we have incorporated it into our daily communication about our own human experiences. Just like we hear a lot of computer language every day, we have another kind of language that has been ubiquitous in our current society, the media, and social media for at least the last couple of decades. And that is the language of violence and the language of aggression. The language of aggression has not only become frequent, but it has become normalized. We are now so used to this language, the language I call sometimes the language of war, that we're very much likely to use it ourselves. And I like to argue that this is why we have so much divisiveness in our world. And this is why we can't talk calmly about certain topics in our communities, in our families, in our relationships, because of this language of aggression, this language of violence that quickly turns a conversation into a heated argument. And of course, that's not what we long for. I have never met someone who says, "I'm really looking forward to arguing with my family, with my partner, with my coworkers, to being at war in my community." No, we all want to have meaningful, healthy, and peaceful relationships. And that's why you and I and all of us need to be aware of this language of aggression and violence and remove it from our communication. Especially now, at this point in human history, when we are having so many wars and armed conflicts, and therefore we are hearing about this kind of language constantly. This language of war, this language of aggression and violence is really impacting how we are relating to one another. I see it in my workshops, with my coaching clients, with my communication students. I hear it in the streets and even in my own internal dialogue. So I decided to put together a podcast series on the language of violence and aggression and give you tools to bring awareness to your communication so that we can all do all we can to remove violence and aggression from our lives and our relationships. There is already too much war. And I'm sure you would agree that you do not need to be at war with the precious people in your life. Let's begin with an essential understanding I teach all my communication students and coaching clients. And that is that the condition of our relationships depends directly on our communication. The ways we speak to each other, listen to each other, and understand or misunderstand each other shape what's present or absent in our relationships. I'm talking about relational values such as connection, safety, harmony, honesty, clarity, compassion, confidence, affection, collaboration. The list goes on. Think about it. Communication is the bridge between our internal world and the external reality we share with others. How we express our needs, share our joys, resolve our conflicts will make or break our relationships. So if you knowingly or unknowingly use a language of aggression, a language of violence in your relationships, here's what's happening. You are saying no to connection. You're saying no to safety, no to harmony, no to honesty, no to clarity, no to compassion, no to confidence, no to affection, no to collaboration. So this is really important because you may really want to have honesty, affection, collaboration in your relationships, but you may be unintentionally using a language that instead of leading you to experience what you want and value in your relationships, they are bringing forth aggression and more violence in your life, in your relationships. And because we are all interconnected, this is also bringing more aggression and more violence in the world. And you may say, Alejandra, I'm not violent. I'm not aggressive. I'm all for peace and harmony. Or perhaps you say, I really want people in my life to feel safe with me. And I really want them to trust that our connection is strong. Whether you are the former or the latter, this is why I'm talking about this with you. Because perhaps when you heard me say that we were going to talk about aggressive language or violent language, you immediately thought of people attacking others with insults and swearing or using psychological or verbal abuse. And while those ways of communicating are aggressive and violent, what I want to discuss with you are the 12 aggressive communication habits we have been most exposed to in the last few years that have been normalized to such an extent that we no longer consider them aggressive or violent. And yet, they are hurting the people in your life and they are preventing you from being able to have the kinds of relationships you would like to have. And because this topic is so big and I want to make it very clear and practical for you, I want to give you explanations, examples, and remedies for all these 12 habits. This episode is the first of a series of episodes in which we will be discussing this topic of the language of aggression and violence. So in this episode, episode 167, we are going to talk about 4 of these 12 habits. So get your heart, your body, and your mind ready. Bring all your attention because this episode helps you understand 4 aggressive communication patterns to watch out for and also give you practical strategies you can implement right now to have healthy, meaningful, and fulfilling relationships that lead you and those you care about to experience more connection, more safety, and more peace. Habit number 1, interrupting and talking over others. So maybe we believe that we know what the other person is going to say. And so we want to save them the trouble. Or maybe we think that the other person will attack us and put us in a vulnerable position. Or maybe we get impatient and we don't have more space to listen. So what do? We cut the other person off before they finished expressing themselves. We see interrupting and talking over others on TV a lot, especially with political commentators or on reality TV shows. And we also see it in the news, in press conferences. We also hear it on the radio or podcasts where people are talking about something and they're expressing different opinions. This is a communication pattern I hear my clients mention a lot when they talk about how unsafe they feel in a relationship. If we want other people to feel safe with us, we need to be aware of talking over them or interrupting them. And we need to learn to let them say whatever they want to say, even if what they do say is what we thought they were going to say, and even if we don't like what they're saying. Talking over or interrupting others is an aggressive communication pattern that signals that we value ourselves more than we value others, or that we do not value their thoughts, their opinions, their ideas, their feelings, their stories, their experiences, or that we don't value them. If we want to have meaningful relationships with the people in our lives, we need to show we value them, especially when someone is close to us. Say in a romantic or intimate relationship, when we interrupt them, we are aggressively exerting power over them. And a healthy adult partnership has shared power. That is to say, we both need to have equal ability to influence the outcome of the conversation. Interrupting or talking over others devalues them. Devaluing language is aggressive. It is violent language. Now, the remedy for this pattern is to learn to listen with presence. And because this is such a fundamental skill for meaningful relationships, I teach a course on listening every fall. This course is called Choosing True Connection. And you can check it out and sign up for it by going to my website, languagealchemy.com. Number 2, correcting to be right. This happens when we tell the other person they're wrong, or when we counter what they are saying and fixate on making sure unimportant details match our understanding, our memory, or our beliefs. So, for example, your sibling is telling a story to all your friends about a family experience that happened when you were both young. And your sibling says something like, you were on your bikes, you took a right turn instead of a left turn, and then you rectify them. No, we didn't take a right turn, we went straight. Well, this detail didn't really matter. Your sibling was talking about getting lost and finding your way back. That was the point of the story. So, what happens is that your sibling may start to feel defensive, or they may shut down, or they may say something like, why don't you tell the story then? Or maybe they start an argument about why it didn't matter if you took a right turn or you went straight. Correcting to be right is an aggressive communication pattern that is so common with family members and intimate partnerships. I see this so frequently when I coach couples. Correcting to be right is not just a disconnecting communication pattern, it is an aggressive one because it shows contempt and criticism for the other person. If this is what you constantly do with the person you chose as your life partner or as your dear friend, then they will feel disconnected from you. They will start to not trust the relationship will make it, or they may feel unsafe to talk to you. And of course, this happens at work too, especially when people want to assert their expertise over others or show off what they know or engage in aggressive communication habits that put certain groups of people down. In my work with clients, I hear from most of my clients who are not considered to be members of the dominant culture, that is to say, women, LGBTQ folks, and people of color, share with me how often they experience this kind of aggressive communication. One of my clients said to me, it's that feeling of being picked on constantly, as if I was a tree and the other person was a woodpecker. Also, this is within the context of noticing that their coworkers who are considered to belong to the dominant culture are allowed to talk and even mention information that is not exactly accurate without being corrected. Now, I know you may ask me, Alejandra, how about when the other person is saying something important that is actually incorrect? Should I just stay quiet and say nothing? Well, the answer here is it depends. If the other person is expressing inaccurately something that's important or relevant, then go ahead, rectify and correct them. And when you do it with kindness. How? By noticing your tone of voice. Your tone of voice carries aggressive energy and it can also carry kind and compassionate energy. If you want to know how to bring kindness when you are correcting someone, think about how you would like to be corrected kindly if you said something incorrect. What kind of tone of voice would feel kind for you to hear? Once you know that, use that same tone of voice when you are correcting someone. If what the person is saying is not that important, but maybe it would be useful to address it, you could say something like, oh, that's not how I remembered it happened. You pause, and then maybe the other person will ask you, well, what do you remember? And then you can talk about it. Or perhaps you can ask a question, such as, is that what you remember happened? Or is that what you saw? Is that what you heard so and so say? That way, you are staying in dialogue instead of using aggressive language that chastises and alienates the other person and shuts the dialogue down. And many times, you don't have to address this immediately as it's happening. You can have that correcting conversation later at a time when neither you nor the other person will escalate the conversation into an aggressive argument. Number 3, shaming. Shaming is such a harmful communication habit. Shaming is about saying something that attacks the other person's identity, character, role in the family or in the group, or their cultural background. And this often leads to the recipient of shame feeling badly about themselves, about who they are, and about their self worth. This is when we say things such as, what's wrong with you? You're useless. You're a bad parent. You're a terrible daughter. Or, for example, when someone makes a mistake and we don't like that, and we say something like, you're just like your mother, you're just like your father, and we say it with a tone of contempt. Or when we put someone in a box, in a category, and we say something intolerant, such as, that's such a typical non-American thing to say, or that's such a typical Latino or Black or Chinese way to behave. Or when we disagree and do not approve of someone's approach, and we say something like, I can't believe someone as educated as you would think that way. And in multicultural relationships, which, by the way, is most of the relationships we have, shaming often targets cultural practices or values. So we say things like, your family's approach to decision making is so backward, or no wonder your country or your state, your city, your town, your people have so many problems. So, how do we remedy shaming others? First, we need to acknowledge how harmful it is for anybody to feel worthless or to feel that there's something wrong with who they are. Wouldn't you want the people in your relationships to feel good about themselves, to feel confident, to feel that they have worth? If your answer is not an immediate yes, then I urge you to seek support from a therapist and explore, why is it that you would not want the people in your life to feel good about themselves, about who they are. But most likely, your answer was, of course I do. I want all the people in my life to feel great about themselves, to know their worth, to know they matter. Well, then when you don't like something they do or say, all you need to do instead of shaming them is just to say that. Yes, it's very simple. All you need to do is say, I didn't like what you did, or I felt hurt by what you said, or I'm uncomfortable with this behavior I just experienced from you. That's it. Number 4, making yourself bigger through your body language. This means that you're making the physical space smaller between you and the other person. How? By lifting your arms, puffing your chest, making big gestures with your hands, pointing fingers, or getting too close to the other person. This is especially harmful with children who already see us adults as bigger than they are. So when you're upset with children, it's important to communicate it in a way that doesn't compromise their sense of worth or their sense of safety. If you are standing up and you're looking down on the child and then you're using big gestures, that child will see you as much bigger than you really are. And this will likely trigger fear in them. And in fact, making ourselves bigger than we are is aimed at having that effect of eliciting fear in others. So let me ask you, would you like the precious and diverse human beings in your life to feel afraid of you? And if your answer is yes, then I am strongly going to advise you to reach out to a therapist. But if your answer is no, and especially if you do happen to be bigger in physical size than the people in your life, or if you know that you tend to make yourself bigger, or if you have received feedback that this is what you usually do, then when you're talking to people in your life and you are uncomfortable, or you don't like what they're saying, or you feel hurt, bring your hands together. Yes. Keep your hands to yourself. Or if you're standing up, sit down. And if you are with a child, do your best to come to eye level with them and make sure there's plenty of physical space between you and the other person so that they feel that they too have the space to exist and the right to share that space with you. And now let's recap what you've heard in this first episode of this series of the language of aggression and violence. Today, we talked about why your relationships are the way they are and how communication contributes to their condition. We also talked about how the language we are exposed to in our current society, the media, and social media influences our own communication with the people in our lives. Then I shared with you about 4 violent or aggressive communication habits that we may be using in our day to day interactions without intending to bring forth violence or aggression. These are: number 1, interrupting and talking over others. Number 2, correcting to be right. Number 3, shaming. And number 4, making ourselves bigger through the use of body language. I also gave you examples and remedies for these 4 aggressive communication habits. Finally, I mentioned we will talk about 12 of these habits in this podcast series. So stay tuned to the next episode, episode 168, in which we will talk about the next 4 communication habits you need to be aware of so that your communication is non-aggressive. And if you would like my support to help you remove these habits from your communication, reach out to me. If you are on my mailing list, you have my email. So email me or set up a consultation with me by going to languagealchemy.com. And if this episode was useful to you, please be generous and leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify, and share this episode with the people in your life. Thank you so much for listening, and a special thanks to all my coaching clients and students who are bringing forth more peace and more love to their relationships by dissolving their aggressive and violent communication habits. Until next episode, and as we say in Argentina, ciao ciao. Original music by Gary LaPoe. You can find all links in the show notes at languagealchemy.com.